Hello and welcome to Recovering Community, a podcast about community, what it means, how it's formed, and how it can be rebuilt. I'm Les Back, Head of Sociology at the University of Glasgow. Thanks for joining me over the last 4 episodes as I've explored Glasgow, meeting the people working to change and strengthen the communities they're part of. In this series, I've discovered that there's plenty of creativity blossoming in the city's post-industrial wastelands, food solidarity taking root in the kitchens of Castlemilk. Curators at the Hunterian Museum are thinking differently about how to use discomfort generated by colonialism, and there's some inspiring but very hard work going on in the city centre to tackle the shocking numbers of lives lost to drugs. At a time when things can feel pretty tough in the academy, it's been a wonderful reminder of what's possible when social research is a living, collaborative practice. And that collaboration can take us far and wide. So for this special bonus edition of Recovering Community, we travelled south of the border to Sheffield to look at how rethinking the relationship between heritage and local communities can make them more inclusive, particularly for the most marginalised. Here, the Roots and Futures project is listening to the perspectives of underserved communities, particularly Sheffield's Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities in 7 locations across the city. The project is informing city-level heritage strategies in partnership with Joined Up Heritage Sheffield, Sheffield City Council, the University of Sheffield and community partners including Zest, SOAR, Sheffield and District African Caribbean Community Association, Care for Young People's Futures, ChilyPep, Manor and Castle Development Trust and the Heeley City Farm. This all might seem a long way from Glasgow, but Roots and Futures is part of the AHRC's place-based research programme, which is based at the University of Glasgow. People rooted in their local communities are absolutely essential to this kind of co-production, and I was lucky enough to meet one of Sheffield's finest, Aisha Jones. Aisha's story mirrors the experience of so many migrants who are both deeply connected to life here in the UK, but kept at arm's length from the people and histories told through our museums and municipal heritage projects. Aisha's been living in Sheffield for over 20 years and pours huge amounts of time and energy into her community volunteering work. It's how she became connected with Roots and Futures. On a blustery day in her local park, I asked Aisha how visible she thought migrant and minority communities are within Sheffield.
To be honest, sometimes they feel invisible because there's nothing to represent us anywhere. No statues for us or pictures or myself on the board, especially in this area.
It's one of the things that's come out already from our talks with people. Is it's hard to live in a place where you don't feel visible, I can imagine.
Yeah, it is hard. That's why sometimes I just say hello to people and try to help them and say, I'm here, I can help you, how are you? And that's how I do my community champion. If I see someone is kind of lost and I guide them.
It seems you have a special gift for that, Aisha, if I may say. Could you just tell us a little bit about your journey? You said you've been living here for 20 years, but what was this is your kind of journey's end. Where did you move through before coming and making home here?
I lived in Kenya and then I got married and lived in Saudi Arabia. But the funny thing, when I was in Kenya, my dad used to always tell me, you see these spoons? They're from England. You see these forks from England and they're durable and they're nice and they're very good stuff. It's like he was introducing me to Sheffield unconsciously. And when I came here, it's like, wow, this is the city my dad was talking about. And that's it. And then after coming from Saudi Arabia, I came here.
So there was a little bit of Sheffield in Kenya.
Yes, of course there was. We had a lot of spoons and forks, all from Sheffield. My destiny.
Well, in a way, it's a sort of it's the destiny of Britain too, in the sense that the connection between Britain and the wider world is often the thread that draws people here, isn't it? I think that's so true. It's such a beautiful story. I absolutely love that. I mean, one of the things that I think the researchers involved in Roots and Futures have been so appreciative of is the idea of working with the community rather than studying on them. And could you tell us a little bit about how you were involved in that process of collaboration?
Yeah, after working with Courtney, I worked with her in a community center, and she called me after a year, and she told me I would like to speak to the community. And I was like, wow, that's exciting. It's like we are finally being recognized. We are finally being noticed that we are here and they want to speak to us. So I have very good connection with the community. So I spoke to my friend. One of my friends met Courtney outside Zest and spoke to her about how the husband came here at the age of 16 with flip-flop. It was cold and he worked in the steel industry.
I like your spoons.
Yes, like my spoons. Yeah.
Where your spoons were made.
Of course. So the husband used to work there and they worked very hard. To an extent, when she was telling me the story, I felt like crying because of the heat they went through, and it shows how much tax they paid as well. And they worked for so many years from when they were 16 until when he passed away. So that was a very interesting story about the Yemenis who came here and did all this work. But it's never depicted or shown anywhere. Like, I would like a statue of them men doing the steel thing and their name on. That would be good. And it would be, I think my friends will be happy that their husbands and children were appreciated for building this country.
I absolutely love Aisha's story about connecting Kenya to Sheffield through the family teaspoons, and we'll hear from her again towards the end of the episode. But next, I'd like to introduce you to two of the researchers working on Roots and Futures. Lizzie Craig Atkins is Professor of Human Osteology at the University of Sheffield and the Principal Investigator of Roots and Futures. Lizzie goes right to the heart of this project, and she's thought deeply about inclusion. But let's begin by listening to Rhonda, one of the newest members of the Roots and Futures team. I was interested to hear them talk about different ways of thinking about inclusion and co-production.
I think it's looking at the diversity of the communities that we have in Sheffield. Sheffield has a rich history of, people coming from different parts of the world and engaging with their heritage and not forgetting who they are and where they come from.
And what aspects of that past are the ones that you think are the most important?
I think remembering where you came from, as an individual, your birthplace impacts a lot on the things that you believe in, the things that you stand for, the things that make you basically who you are.
And do you think that means that a city like Sheffield is remade by all of those many feet that have walked these streets and brought the connections from the places they've come from and the lives that they've made here?
I'm going to go down the road of Carnival, because Carnival allows everybody to be inclusive and to showcase their culture. So Sheffield has been fortunate to have their Carnival because that allows us to engage with all the communities to showcase their culture in Carnival, for everybody to get a taste of the food and their dance and their music and everything. So basically, that's what Roots and Futures is about, remembering your culture and your heritage and holding on to your identity. You don't need to change to fit in. Be you.
Do you think, though, and I want to ask this to you, Lizzie, does it mean that then what Sheffield is and what it's becoming shifts with that process too?
Yeah, very much so. I think the city has to shift because the people that constitute the city will change over time. And the roots elements of Roots and Futures is important because the city has a history, it has a heritage, but that history and heritage is constantly remade, reimagined and reinvented by new people. And trying to make those connections in ways that empower and support people who've previously not really had much of a say in how that's done is really kind of what Roots and Futures is about. So I guess one of the ways that we can help is by raising the profile, by showing the fact that these sorts of things should be a priority to people who hold the purse strings at kind of local and regional government level, but also enabling people to do their own thing and step outside those structures, get their own funding, create their own organisations.
So you're both trying to reflect and give a voice to people within Sheffield to describe their sense of place. But do you think that in a way what the project is doing is remaking what community is here?
Yeah, I think, you know how you would take an old picture and refurbish it to bring it back to life. And I think that's what Roots and Futures is doing, re-imaging in that way.
One area that's really important to the kind of conversation about what's changing here is to do with visibility. And visibility is a theme that came up in all of our consultations over the past 12 months, that many of the communities we've worked with have a strong internal sense of their own identity, but they don't see that identity reflected elsewhere in the city. And so when we're thinking about ideas of reimagining community or re-imaging, there's a real strong sense, I think, from people's input to the project that needs to have an element of diversity. The city needs to look like the communities that make up the city as it is today, while not forgetting all those communities that have come, have been, have gone, or indeed are still here. Because Sheffield has a really long history of many different migrant groups. Sheffielders come from many, many different backgrounds, but they're all Sheffielders.
And what do you feel is your sense of how open the municipality has been and the city itself to the kinds of questions that you're trying to explore, really, and a way of reimagining what the city is itself?
We're really lucky as a project to have partners representing both the City Council, and we've been working with the Council from the very beginning of the project, and also representing the city's heritage strategy, which has now just been adopted by the Council, creating a nice link between those two kind of policy-based partners that we began the project with. So I think what's really valuable about the way that Sheffield has gone about it, thinking about its heritage strategy, is that it's a grassroots document produced by community organisations within the city. The caveat to all that optimism was, of course, that one of the main objectives of that strategy is founded on a recognition that the different voices present in its formation were not fully representative of all the different communities in the city. So I guess that's where we find ourselves as a project with our policy and strategy partners, Joined Up Heritage Sheffield and Sheffield City Council, is helping to support that breadth and growth of different participants that there are within their excellent strategies, and hopefully develop and kind of change things for the future so that everything works in a way that benefits all communities in the city.
I wonder if I could ask each of you if there's an example you can think of from the project that you have been surprised by, something that you couldn't have imagined before doing the project that it's revealed.
I think what's been really significant for me is the extent to which our community participants, people from across the city, from different backgrounds who have traditionally been underserved and marginalised by the way heritage has been presented and done, have been willing to share so much of their kind of insight and their understanding with us. One of the strongest and kind of most affecting part of our interviews was when we were working directly with the Black Ladies group, who are based at Park Library and work under the auspices of Manor and Castle Development Trust. They wanted to work with us directly on an Oral Histories project. They wanted to share their stories of being Caribbean women who had come into Sheffield generally in the kind of mid-20th century and made a life with the city here. But they were also really engaged and really enthusiastic about sharing some of the challenges and the problems that they faced. They were really hopeful about the way in which this might change in the future. And they shared some really important insights. One lady explained that living in the city for the last 40, 50 years, she'd never seen anything that made her feel like she was visible or that you could tell that black or brown people, in her words, were living here. And I think that made a really strong impression on me because it really did show the foundations of why work like this is still so necessary.
And I think it would be amazing if this project could run next year, year after, keep going, just keep going. I think that Roots and Futures shouldn't just be something that just happens and at the end of 2023, because of funding, we've forgotten about. You know, the funders should recognize, in my opinion, this is a gold nugget we have here and we should invest in it because, you know, just like roots, it's going to grow and it's going to grow leaves and our young people are the leaves. And the future are the fruits that will hang from those branches. So, yeah.
Ah, beautiful metaphor there from Rhonda, illustrating why projects like Roots and Futures are so important. Rhonda and Lizzie's reflections on representation took me back to our episode on the Museum of Discomfort at Glasgow's Hunterian Museum. There's a deep history of underrepresentation in our society, and it's so important and valuable for everyone to have a better understanding of how identities, places and cultures are shaped. Co-production is a bit of a buzzword in research at the moment, and it's so much easier to talk about than actually implement. But when it's done well, it really works. Izzy Carter is a historian and the co-investigator of Roots and Futures. Much of her work is connected to place and working with communities. One of the people she collaborates with is Robin Hughes from Joined Up Heritage Sheffield, and he brings a lot of expertise about Sheffield's built environment to Roots and Futures. I met them both in the beautiful St George's Churchyard, right next to the University of Sheffield's Diamond Building, and I began by asking Lizzie how working with place and city life can help us understand how communities work.
So we are really passionate about place on the Roots and Futures project, and we describe it as a place-based heritage project. Now, we approach place in a couple of different ways. So obviously, we're based in Sheffield. This is a project that is just focusing on Sheffield. So place as a geographical element is very important to us in that sense. But we also understand place as something that is a little bit more abstract. So it's something that is kind of a repository for emotions, experiences, people's memories. It's what people use to kind of shape stories about themselves and their identities. So we also understand place as something that very much informs experience and belonging.
I guess the risk sometimes for researchers or policymakers or politicians is to tell people about their places and who they are and their communities.
Yeah.
But it feels like the project is trying to change how we understand community from both within, but also in dialogue with those without.
Yes, absolutely. So the ethos of the project is really around co-production. We are working ultimately to really disrupt those traditions of community engagement work that impose knowledge and expertise from an institution like a university onto communities, and will purely extract information from communities for the sake of a research project.
I imagine, Izzy, as a researcher, often we try to control the questions and the problems that we want to prioritise. It feels like in the context of this commitment to co-production, you have to let go of some of those controls.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about what's been gained, but also what maybe the challenges of that process of letting go?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm an oral historian by trade, so I'm used to doing the interviewing and have come up with some interview questions that I know I want to ask, but then I'll kind of leave the conversation open to the people that I'm working with. With something like this, it's much more important to allow the organisations that we're working with to kind of set the questions. So in practice, what we did when we were approaching the consultations was come up with a set of themes that were responsive to the community need as we'd assessed it thus far. We came up with, I don't know how many questions, so many questions that were not necessarily applicable to directly asking community members. We then put those questions to the community organisations, and we had essentially a working draft of what those questions looked like. They were then amended by each organisation. So they would pick questions from our question bank that most suited them and what they were hoping to find out from their communities, and then reword them to make them a lot more accessible. And that importance of terminology and accessible language has been something that has just come up again and again and again that I have found really interesting from an academic perspective to interact with, because I have even sat in consultations and immediately with my note-taking translated what people are telling me directly into kind of academic speak, because I'm used to doing that. And I've actually had people saying to me, what are you writing down there? Are you writing down what we're saying, or are you translating this in some way? And how far is some meaning lost there? And how far is this kind of subscribing to kind of hierarchies of power within language, and actually perhaps using academic language to sometimes alienate the communities that you're working with?
Thank you so much, Izzy. We have another member of this collaboration, Robin Hughes from Joined Up Heritage. Could you just do the same, Robin? So just tell us who you are and where you work and your involvement in Roots and Futures.
So yes, I'm Robin Hughes, and I'm a trustee of a charity called Joined Up Heritage Sheffield. I don't work at all. I mean, you know how it is with retirement. You stop working and wonder how you ever had time to go to work in the first place. And I probably ought to tell you something about Joined Up Heritage Sheffield itself. So it came into being, 7 years ago, something like that. A group of various kinds of heritage campaigners felt that for a long time heritage, and I'll come to what heritage is in a moment, heritage in the city had a fairly poor deal. The physical fabric of heritage, the historic environment in the city has got particularly badly eroded over successive decades. And there didn't seem to be much appreciation of how this actually, related to people who lived in the city or worked or played here, and what it meant to them, the significance to them. And it was time to try and draw those threads together to try and influence public policy, because that's the big thing. So if you can have some kind of influence over how those decisions are made, then actually a lot of the rest will just become a great deal easier. But it wasn't all about being a lobby group or a campaign group. It was actually trying to be something of a collective voice for the heritage sector. And so what this group decided to do was to try and create a heritage strategy for the city. And it's going to be different to all other heritage strategies, because the usual model is a local authority perceives the value of heritage or the historic environment and decides they're going to have a heritage strategy. They'll get a consultant in. Consultants will go out and consult. They'll do a good job. And then there'll be a kind of top-down narrative. So we said, right, we're going to go from the grassroots up. It's going to be something that's created by the community for the city as a whole. So it's not a community heritage strategy as such. It's a strategy that is for Sheffield, and which we wanted decision makers and the big movers and shakers in the city to be able to take forward and actually be part of the implementation.
Well, but it seems like there's a risk that municipalities or politicians hand the citizens of a city like Sheffield their heritage, and the risk is that it's kind of given over to or imposed in a way. And I just wanted to ask you about what you're trying to join up.
We're trying to join up and harness the immense energy that you can see all around the city. There are lots and lots of heritage groups. There's about 40 registered already, but that's maybe not much more than the tip of the iceberg. Everywhere you look, somebody has something they care about. You have to ask why they care about it. It's because of the meaning that they ascribe to it. But they weren't being heard outside their area. They needed a sense of, here's all this energy, here's all this passion, here's all this creativity, and it's being very well directed, but it's not then amounting to something larger so that the city as a whole starts to understand itself. And you start to realise, actually, these buildings might be important because of their grandness and because of the money that was spent on them, but they're also important because hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people have been there, and to them it was just where they did this. And their story is then interwoven with the story of that building. Actually, all that building is the kind of, it's the cover around all these threads that are going through. And it's those threads, those narratives that actually keep us secure in our environment. So, you can design a building for safety and security, but actually a recognisable place, a place that has some kind of meaning to you personally and to the people that are close to you, but also to other people that you don't know, that can make you feel safer in your environment because this is your place, you belong here. Now, it's not necessarily all about places. It can be about books, it can be about stories, it can be about recipes. Our definition of heritage was deliberately drawn very, very widely. I summarise it by saying it's heritage if it's something you've inherited that you care about enough to want to be able to leave for succeeding generations to enjoy as well. And that's it. It doesn't have to be a physical thing. It can be an idea. It can be a place that has no physical things in it, just where something happened or where people happen to meet. So it's deliberately a very, very wide definition. Almost the classic Sheffield example of an abstract, significant place is somewhere like Coles Corner. Coles is not there anymore. Coles left there the same year I was born. The building that Coles was in was demolished a couple of years later. So Cole Brothers, the department store, moved on, and since then they became John Lewis and they vacated their building. The whole world is a different place now. So the place is just this bit of the pavement. This is where people used to arrange to meet because it was a conveniently central corner outside a nice department store. And yet the name persists. Richard Hawley has used it as the title of one of his albums. Everybody still knows where it is. There's even a plaque there, if I remember rightly. And yet, is that a heritage asset? I mean, in planning terms, it isn't. But in many other definitions, it is. And we've got to somehow make it apparent that a place can be valuable for reasons that you can't quite put your finger on, and they don't necessarily have objects that you can touch, and yet they are valuable and they connect people together.
Are there times, Robin, where those who claim the heritage for their own sometimes come or make claims that are kind of proprietorial, that are for us and not you, say? Or can it be a space where there's a struggle?
It can be. I'd almost flip that around a little bit and say there's a bit of a tendency to assume that somebody who is in some way different to us must appreciate different things. So it's not so much this is my heritage, hands off. It's I need to discover what this other person's heritage is. And by asking the question, you may discover that in terms of its physical presence, it's the same stuff. It may even be appreciated in exactly the same way, just because somebody's grandparents are from a different country or a different class. This does not mean that they have to pick a side, they have to pick what it is that is going to be appreciated. And this very much ties in with the Roots and Futures idea of not going out and being extractive, not saying, right, you tell us about the things that you like, because that'll be a load of new stuff, won't it? And as with everything in life, some of it will be the same, some of it will be different.
Wise words there from Robin. The story of community is about continuity and change. Well, it's nearly time to bring the special bonus episode of Recovering Community to a close. But before I go, I want to leave you with a final thought from Aisha Jones, the wonderful community volunteer who we heard from at the start. It really was inspiring to share time and listen to her experiences. And I asked Aisha, what does community mean to her?
I don't know. I always go back to Kenya, and I was brought up in an area whereby we had a community center run by the missionaries. Every time when we are at home and we're bored, we would just go to the center. And at the center, we'll meet all the people from our area. And we're like a big family in a small place. That is community. They helped us, they gave us milk, they helped us with uniform, and a lot of stuff they gave us. And we had fun. We had like swings. And we just went there and enjoyed ourselves. I see it here. It's just now, we are very early, but if you come at like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, there is community going on here, and you can literally come here and be fed with the community. And I'm not joking. You get food and tea. Because there's Yemeni, there's Syrians, there's a lot of people come together and they eat, they exchange words, they exchange numbers to know each other, and they enjoy the weather. It's such a nice way of being in one community and in one area and come together and, celebrate where we're living.
Well, Aisha, it's such a joy to talk to you.
Thank you.
You really are a champion of this community, and it's a real honour to meet you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Best
very
wishes
much.
for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. At least I'm recognized now. Thank you for listening to me.
We didn't pay you to say that, but actually that was brilliant.
That was really one of my favourite experiences of the whole series. In his novel Shame, Salman Rushdie wrote, "We pretend that we are trees and speak of roots. But is our sense of place only about that?" Rushdie further provokes his readers. Look under your feet. You will not find gnarled growths sprouting through the soles. People are not trees, tethered permanently to place. The story of the modern world is also about the roots of migration. The heritage of any place is made at the crossroads of those routeways. So the ground of community is always a story of rootedness in place and the traffic of people, culture and things across what geographer Doreen Massey called a global sense of place. Just like the story of Aisha's teaspoon in Kenya, made of Sheffield steel. That's it for this season of Recovering Community. I'm Les Back, and I'm really grateful to everyone who has given their time and expertise to make these episodes possible. If you're interested in finding out more about the Roots and Futures project in Sheffield, have a look online. There are so many more branches on this tree. We're already working on plans for our next episodes, but your feedback, comments and questions are always so welcome. You can get in touch with me via social media, and there's more information in the show notes. If you're interested in podcasting as part of your academic research, please do share your work or what you're listening to. I'm always so interested to hear what other people are working on. Thanks to the staff in the School of Social and Political Sciences and the College of Social Sciences who have helped with this project. Recovering Community is produced by Freya Hellier.